All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Wednesday Night Reviews. I'm your host, Konrad, and joining me today on the right side of your screen is Riley Hamilton, and we're going to talk about their new book coming out, SPQR, which you could find on Kickstarter. So, tell us about the book. What's going on with it? What can people expect? Do the spiel.
So I haven't actually done a ton of elevator pitches for this book. I mean,
Ooh.
that's the one good thing about sort of, doing your own work. But I mean, I guess I'll have to refine my elevator pitches for, when I have to actually promote the Kickstarter.
Yep.
So how I like to describe it is an action, I don't want to say adventure, more sort of like a historical action drama with legions of Romans. That's how I like to describe it in sort of one sentence. So it's very much a character driven story that's sort of set in the backdrop of, the Roman Empire, which I feel is, as a historical period, I think is fairly underrepresented in comics. I mean, because a lot of no, I mean, admittedly, historical comics are sort of, I don't want to say hit or miss, but a lot of people feel, with comics as a medium, you can create your own worlds. You can create fantastical worlds that have nothing to do with, our known existence here on Earth.
Yep.
So I feel like historical comics are sort of, I don't want to, they're a niche. There's a few really, really good ones out there, but for me, I found that there aren't a lot of them, period. Now, maybe
Yeah.
this is just me not being able to find them in the right places, but there's a few that I've read that I really, really enjoy. And those ones are a big inspiration on, or were a big influence on SPQR when I was, coming up with the idea, writing the first issue, and hopefully writing future issues if things, go well.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. And as you've been saying that, I'm actually thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, I haven't really seen that many historical fiction, especially around the Roman Empire, in comics. I haven't seen that many, period. But yeah, I'd never even thought of that before. Like, there's tons of, obviously, books, and there's, God, countless TV series on them. Like, yeah, they're out there in other formats. But yeah, for comics, it's not really like I said, it's a niche market. It's interesting to talk about that as well as the subject matter of the book. Why the Roman Empire?
So again, this is where it sort of has a funny, origin story in terms of interest in the Roman Empire. So when I went to Queens, I was a history major,
Oh,
and I
okay.
took a bunch of classics courses on the side. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, classical studies is the study specifically of archaeology, and in particular, ancient civilizations like the ancient Greeks, like the ancient Egyptians, like the ancient
Oh,
Romans, amongst others. So a lot of those classes, especially in the first and second year courses, are a lot of talk of ancient Rome and ancient Greece. So you get a lot of coverage of that stuff, and that had always been a fascinating period for me. And I remember before I even was in university, first being interested in the Roman period when one of my friends, my best friend actually, from when I was a kid, he was telling, we were, out on the playground one day, and he was telling me, oh, there's this, we were about, I don't know, 10, maybe 10, 11. He was like, oh, there's this really cool, game that my dad just got on his computer, and I've been playing it a lot, and it's really fun, and I really think you'd like it, and we should play at some point. And I was like,
uh-huh.
oh, okay, what's it called? And he's like, it's called Rome Total War. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, that's kind of cool. And I played that game once, and I was hooked. And I mean, I've played every Total War game since then, and I've sunk hundreds, probably hundreds of hours into Rome Total War. So I mean, now admittedly, I go back and look at it, and as a historian, oh God, it's so ahistorical. Ooh, but as a 10, 11 year old, you don't care about that stuff. And that's what got, and I can honestly say, even as ahistorical as the game is, looking back on it, 16 years later, it got me interested in history. It got me hooked on it, and I ended up, studying that in history, studying that in university, and it ended up becoming my undergraduate major. So
Wow.
mission accomplished, I guess, in a sense.
It got you hooked. It worked, right? That's awesome.
Exactly.
Wow. So I did want to ask just the way you said that. So your undergrad was in classics, correct?
I was in history with
Okay.
I had taken the way that the programs are structured at Queens is that you actually don't choose your major when you first go into university as a freshman.
Mm-hmm.
That first year, you can take a whole bunch of, there's the faculty of arts and science. So it's all the arts courses and all the science departments are all together in one faculty. So
Oh,
you
okay.
could take, for example, in like first year, you could take, history, like Canadian history, you could take the history of ancient Rome, you could take, and then along with that, you can also take, math and biology as well at the same time. So that gives you a lot of flexibility.
Wow. Okay.
So that first year I did like history courses, which I knew I'd like, politics, which I knew I'd like, and classics because I was like, ooh, more history and ancient history, which I was really interested in. So those first couple of years, I had the option of taking those classics courses, sort of not because it was my major or my minor, but because I had free space and they were
Oh,
available
okay.
to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how it sort of started, or at least that's how I got those courses in university. Now later on, I had to drop those as I sort of focused more on, you know, actual proper history courses as opposed to classics, which is more, archaeology and less about history and more about, sort of curation and actually going to digs and things like that. So more preservation, yeah, all that sort of stuff. So that
Huh.
was sort of less interesting to me. That's still very interesting, but less interesting. And I was more interested in sort of, I guess you'd call it traditional history, like reading about, studying documents, things like that, as opposed to
Okay.
actually going on site and, investigating ruins, as cool as that is.
Interesting. Yeah, that's fascinating. Like me personally, I had no clue about the division. I'm while I appreciate history and Roman history and all that kind of stuff, the ancient stuff, which I think just bleeds into my love of fantasy. Yeah, I didn't know about the distinctions between that. So thanks for the explanation because it's informative.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, and so when it comes to SPQR, I'm really curious because obviously you've got a background in history. Are you going to be trying to like adhere to like strict historical accuracy, or are you going to allow yourself to be a little more fluid and just tell a good story?
So that's the great challenge of all historical fiction is how much do we, take as historical fact? Well, how much do we base it on historical events versus how much creative liberty are we going to take to tell a good story? Because ultimately, I
Absolutely.
feel that creating a good story is more important than sticking to strict historical accuracy. If they line up or you can make them work, I think you should try to make it work. And generally, I think people can do a pretty good job. For SPQR in particular, there was one inspiration for the book that was very influential for me in terms of using history as sort of an anchor point for the story.
Okay.
So there's one of the historical comic book series that I personally love. It's my personal favorite and is probably the number one sort of influence on SPQR is Northlanders by Brian Wood. I don't know if you've read it or not.
I haven't. I might be wrong, but started reading anyway. Sword Daughter, which I believe is by Brian Wood and Mac Chatter. But no, I haven't read Northman.
Okay, so Northlanders, just to give everyone who hasn't read it sort of a little overview, is it's basically the same an idea of a historical fiction set during the Viking era. And how Brian Wood and the rest of the team did it was they sort of would do arcs. So, like, as opposed to, some more traditional comics following one set of characters from sort of beginning to end throughout the entire series, it was broken up so that each arc, each sort of 5 to 8 issue arc followed a set of characters. And then after that
Oh,
arc was over, their story was done. It would move to another completely different time period in the Viking era, follow a completely
oh,
different set of characters in a completely different location. So, some of the stories, one story is about, a Viking who goes to Constantinople to fight for the Byzantine emperor and then returns home to I believe Norway or Iceland. I can't remember which one. I think it might be Iceland. And then sort of reckons with everything that's gone on in his family since he's been gone overseas for a decade or however long.
Oh wow.
And
Okay.
then sort of right after that story ends, the next story is a 2 issue sort of short narrative about this small island off the coast of England called Lindisfarne. And on Lindisfarne, there's a monastery,
Hmm.
or the remains of a monastery now. It was a Christian monastery that was raided by the Vikings, pillaged, destroyed, burned. They made off with all the, any treasure, any sort of artifacts, and, went home. But we don't know anything more about it. All we know from history is that it was raided, they burned it down in this year. That's it.
Oh wow.
So
That's
what Brian Wood did in that story was he actually, created a story, created characters. The main character is a small boy on this island when it's being raided by the Vikings, and it's
oh.
all about what happens to him when this is going on. And
Hmm.
so completely historically accurate because everything that we know about it happened, but also with enough vagueness that the creative license is there for you to be able to actually create a story, which is what he did. And that particular story, that particular arc, that 2 issue arc was the big inspiration for the first issue of SPQR because the main event that goes down in issue 1, which I won't get into too much here because I
Yeah,
don't
no
want to spoil
spoilers.
anything, but I know that you've actually had a look through the issue. That event, that what happens in sort of the back half of the book, is an actual historical event that we have
Oh.
record of set in that same year, the year of the four emperors, 69 CE. So CE is the Common Era, which is everything from what we normally have is BC and AD, right? That's what most people sort of know. That's what's in the convention. But in sort of academia, to sort of make it simpler, you have BCE and CE. So CE essentially replaces AD, and BCE replaces BC.
Oh,
So
perfect. Okay.
it's fairly straightforward in that because I remember I'd always, when we were in school as kids, we'd always hear like, BC is before Christ, and CE and AD was after death, and I was always like, but what about those like 30 years when he was alive? What's that
Yeah.
considered? But that's not actually what AD means, but that's what we were told as when we were
Oh.
in primary school. For our sake in academia now they use the Common Era, which is 0 to now, so we'd be 2020 CE, and everything before that is BCE. So the BC doesn't really change, but CE for this purpose in the story is 69. So it's 69 CE. There's a lot of chaos in Rome itself. It's called the year of the four emperors because there were four emperors in that single year. One died
Oh, Jesus.
through, like death, but assassinations and deposit and like guys being deposed and dying of natural causes or illness, just complete mayhem. And while this is all going on, there's a tribe of what the Romans would call barbarians. Basically, not what when Romans say barbarians, they mean non-Romans. So
Oh, okay.
whenever you hear the term barbarian in this context, usually they're talking about like people from Northern Europe, like Gauls and Germans and Britons and things like and people like that. But more generally, it means non-Romans.
Wow.
Anyways,
Okay.
this tribe of what the Romans would call, like I said, barbarians, is starving, looking for food, looking for rest, and they cross over the border and they do what desperate people do. They raid and they pillage and they take what they need. And the Roman response to that is what we see in the issue, and
Yep.
that, as we know, was a historical event. We know what they did. They faced them. What happened. I don't want to.
Yeah. Don't.
I guess it's a historical event, so I'm not spoiling anything. But in case people want to,
Yeah.
not read up
Exactly.
on it and wait for the book, then I won't say too much. But
I'll say I
that's
didn't know. So.
yeah, it's a very similar case to that one on Lindisfarne, where we know
Wow.
what happened, but we don't have any names, we don't have any details about what happened
Oh,
afterwards. We
cool.
just know it went in, it happened, and then it's never heard from again in the annals of history. So we have a lot of creative freedom there to create a story and use a real historical event as the backdrop.
Beautiful. And That's so cool. Like I'm so happy to hear that you were able to find a point in history within your set of interests that you wanted to write about that just clicked like that and worked. And yes, like you said, I've gone through the reviewer issue or the reviewer copy. Very much enjoy it. It's so cool to know that it's actually like part of, well, obviously your contribution is fictional, but it's cool that it could have realistically could have happened.
Yeah, I love having a little kernel of truth in there. It's nice. It's kind of cool to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very curious, just because the way what you said earlier about having written this one and depending on how your Kickstarter goes, what's going to happen there. Do you have drafts yet beyond this, or did you sort of want to complete this because it is a full comic, and then see how it panned out, like
So I do
workflow
have
wise?
drafts. I have been
Oh,
working
okay.
on issue two. I have sort of a roadmap of where I want the this whole arc to go.
Hmm.
Now I don't want to, go on about it being an arc because to me that seems a little ambitious at this point.
But your
But I'm just
story you're
taking it.
telling.
But I do have sort of an overall plan of where I want to go with this story, and I'm sort of taking it piece by piece. And I do have drafts of issue two. They're rough right now. There's some holes that I need to try and fix, and there's a lot of refining to do. It's still in sort of the early stages, but I'll probably sort of leave that aside for the next little while as sort of the Kickstarter consumes my, at least the next month, couple of months probably, because there's so much to manage on that side. There's a lot, and especially for one person because it's me who's handling all the social media, all the promotion. So I'll have my hands full with that. So right
Yes.
now there is a draft of issue two, and I have that sort of a general idea of where I want to go with it,
Perfect.
but I don't have anything concrete that I can say, yes, this is definitively 100% how it goes, what's going to happen at this point.
Perfect. But the creative juices are flowing. You've got the ideas. I love it. One thing before we launch into all the details of the Kickstarter, because I want to know, that way I can support you. The cover's gorgeous. Throughout the book as well, though, it's very consistent. You use or I don't know if it's real Roman motifs. I believe it is. The sort of they look like a bunch of little snakehead columns that sort of tie the issue together. So artistically and thematically, it's beautiful. But I think one thing that pulled my eye, or one thing that got me through the issues, is how well you used the framework, bubble positioning for lettering, as well as just the general events in the way you organize them in your paneling. Your How you led my eye through these books was top notch. I've seen books from DC do a far worse job, and it's always disappointing. So to have picked up what I will call an indie comic, because you're just self-publishing this thing,
Yes.
and have that level of leading going on of the eye, it's perfect. So it's, from my opinion, is a very well put together book. You clearly planned this thing out well, or maybe tested a bunch of different ways you wanted to show everything. But yeah, it's a well put together book. So I think people will be able to get it, read it, and enjoy it. And for everyone watching, you do not have to have a degree in history to understand this. I myself have a BA in psychology and just a love of comics. It's a great book. It'll read easy for you. So, how can people get this book? Tell me about Kickstarter.
Okay. So the Kickstarter will be live from December 1st until December 30th. So it's a 30-day Kickstarter. And through there are a number of different tiers that people can support at. And each tier lists off what rewards you get. So based on your level of financial commitment, you'll get essentially more stuff. That's
Yeah.
that's sort of the simplest way I can put it. I didn't really do anything revolutionary with the Kickstarter. I followed a couple of good friends who had recently done Kickstarters,
Oh.
and I basically followed their model. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So
Absolutely.
I can't really say I did anything that original with the Kickstarter, So the tiers that I have a general support tier that's $1, which
Yeah.
is you get credit for helping the book along. So at the very back of the book, there's going to be a thank you credits list for everyone who donated to the Kickstarter, everyone who contributed. That first tier, you get the credit.
Hmm.
If you just want that and you don't want any of the other rewards, that's fine. It's
And like you
one
said,
dollar just
yeah,
in there. If you just want to get your name in the book.
I think that's on every campaign I've ever seen. Yeah,
Yep. So again, not reinventing the wheel at all.
but if it works, yeah.
So then the next tier up is a digital copy. So it's just a digital copy similar to the one that I sent to you. The third tier after that is a physical copy plus the digital. So, and sort of how I work it is that each tier builds on the last one. So you get all the rewards from the previous tier for each one as you go up, which is pretty standard for a lot of Kickstarter campaigns.
Hmm.
The next tier is actually a special tier, which is a little bit more expensive than the standard physical copy.
Yep.
It's a physical copy, but with our special Kickstarter exclusive variant cover. So I actually have a variant cover specific for this Kickstarter. There's only going to be, I believe, 30 of them or 40, I think is the plan. Because I want to
Nice.
try and keep it as exclusive as possible. So it's like, this is like a one-time thing if you really want to get into it. And that cover, and that one's also a very beautiful cover, very different style to the one that's in front, that you would have shown everyone.
Okay.
That one, the one that's on the standard cover, is by a Filipino artist, Ralph Barrientos. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. I love
Yeah.
that cover. It's so nice, isn't it?
It's I honestly when I loaded it up, I was like, oh, like I don't know how you contacted this artist, and maybe you were friends or something, or maybe you saw their work and loved it, but I was impressed. Like I have not seen a kickstarted comic that wasn't made by like an already established artist. Like I haven't seen an indie comic with that kind of good, beautiful cover yet. And I've had my fair share of look because I like trying to support everyone I can. And yeah, that's gorgeous.
Yeah. So that's actually Ralph Barrientos is his name. You can find him on Twitter and Instagram at Box Set Bully.
Bugs okay.
Yeah, his work was phenomenal. Oh my God. I saw that he had done work on another cover that was done in a similar style to that one. And I was like, I have to talk to this guy. I
Mm,
have to. So, and he was nice enough to agree and make that cover for me.
that's good choice. That's
But yeah,
wicked.
but the other cover, the other variant cover is a more traditional sort of style. It's by a Brazilian artist named Antonio Ochoa,
Okay.
and his style is very sort of reminiscent of, I want to say, like sort of New 52, like the very first early New 52, like that very very, I don't want to say DC style, but that sort of very clean lines,
Yes.
very like colorful, looks very very good. And it's a completely different style of cover in terms of, this one is the one by Ralph is very sort of solitary. It's the one, the kid and the boy and his horse,
Yeah.
whereas the other one is very sort of, there's a lot more going on with it, and it's a lot more action oriented. So that one is the Kickstarter exclusive. So there's only a limited number of those ones in that tier.
Hmm.
And then from there, the next tier up is adding in a few prints. So I'll have 4 prints that'll be available for this Kickstarter. So a print of each of the 2 covers. So if you get one and you really like the cover, the other one, but you don't
Oh,
have it
okay.
necessarily, that's an option. And there are actually a couple of other commissions that I put out to a couple of other artists, one in, I believe, California, the other in France, that are
Wow.
also very eye-catching. And I think that a lot of people will be looking at those ones as well. They're not covers, they're just purely prints as
Oh, okay.
Kickstarter rewards, but they're very, very nice. Again, same Roman theme, but very, very nice.